This week it's cold.
So this week we're going to do airspace and charts. And one of the reasons we're doing them together is because basically the charts tell you about airspace. And so that's kind of like why we need to have them. And then let me turn some of the... Yeah, I got all Los Angeles sections there. Okay, so again, the same thing as last time. Why do we need to know about the ATIS? Well, because it's a rule. There's lots of rules. And why do we need to know about airspace? Same thing. There's rules. So remember last time we learned about the ATIS because we wanted to find out what the weather was where we were taking off and if we were allowed to take off? Well, same thing applies to the different airspace. We need to learn about the different airspace to learn whether the weather is good enough for us to be in that airspace. Okay. And then the other part is that you need to know what kind of equipment you have to be in certain airspaces. Like, do you guys know what a transponder is?
Not exactly.
Benjamin, do you know?
Kind of like on the act like flight radar, so you can tell like where the planes are.
Yes. And nowadays we've got ADS-B, and I'll bet you can tell me what ADS-B is. I don't remember what the letters stand for, so they stand for ADS-B. But basically what ADS-B does is it sends out your exact location and altitude using GPS to determine that. And so then all the planes in like a 30 nautical mile circle around you will know where you are. So if you can look on ForeFlight or whatever and you see an ADS-B exchange where they have all those little planes, that's all because of ADS-B now. And so not only does ATC know about stuff, but we know where other planes are, which is really handy if you're in a busy airspace and ATC says, hey, there's a plane at 12 o'clock 3 miles away, and you're looking at 12 o'clock 3 miles and you don't see it, but you can see it on your ForeFlight, and so you can go, okay, maybe I'll go to the right here because they look like they're going to the left, or maybe I can see that they're at 2,000 feet and I'm at 2,500, maybe I'll go up to 3,000. And that way, and then you can keep looking for them, and if you got young eyes like you guys have, you can probably find them. But if you got old eyes like me, it's harder to find them, and that kind of helps you. Or especially if you're going to land in Paso. In Paso, they don't have a tower controller telling you what to do. So if you're going to Paso and there's a bunch of planes there, you're going, okay, I see where this guy is, and I just heard him say that he's on final or he's on downwind. So it helps you get situational awareness. And then the other thing we need to know about airspace is what kinds of things are we allowed to do? Are we allowed to be like in Paso? We don't have to talk to anybody. We can take off not talking to anybody at all. But here, we have to talk to the ground, we have to talk to the tower, and then once we're out of here, we don't have to talk to anybody anymore. Okay. So basically, the reason we need to know about airspace is because it affects the instruments, who we talk to, and what kind of weather we've got. Okay. And then this is a little confusing sometimes, but there's visual flight rules and visual meteorological conditions. And the two are kind of connected, and we oftentimes say, okay, it's VFR. That means that, okay, it's nice and sunny, but what we really mean is we've got visual meteorological conditions. Okay? And so that's why we also need to know about airspace, because the rules for how far we have to be away from clouds, how many miles we can see, change depending on what airspace we're in. And so we need to know, okay, are we in, class Bravo? Are we in class Charlie? Are we, what are the rules that apply wherever we have to be? And classic golf is, it's got really complicated rules, but sometimes you can have like, the minimum would be like 1 mile in clear of clouds. And our runway here is 6,000 feet. Any of you guys remember how long a mile is in feet?
Not exactly.
5,280.
Okay,
So if you have 1 mile visibility, that means you can't even see the end of the runway. So why would you be flying if you can't even see the end of the runway?
Because you're a storm chaser?
Possibly. But then you'd probably be flying on instrument flight rules.
Probably.
But what if you are a crop duster,
Oh.
right? You might be able to say, okay, I don't care as long as I'm under the clouds, and even though it's not real good visibility, I might be, I'm just going to land in this road and fill back up with insecticide or fertilizer or whatever I'm doing. And so, maybe that's why you don't need a whole big amount of space to fly. But for me, if it's not 5 or 6 miles, I'm not going up in the air because I can't, that makes me really nervous. Like, especially like if we have the smoke come in sometimes from fires, it's not very nice to fly and that kind of stuff. So I'm never going to be worried about what class golf minimums are because my minimums are way higher than that. Okay. And then if it's not legal to fly with visual flight rules, then you need to use instrument flight rules, okay? And again, it's the same deal with instrument meteorological conditions are anything worse than that chart we just saw. And then instrument flight rules are the rules that we have to follow when we're in the clouds or possibly in, lower than that, but also if you are doing things like if you're an airliner. Airliners always fly under IFR so that they are talking to the controller from the time they start to the time they end. Okay. And then sometimes you might want to fly under IFR if you're legal to because you're going to fly down into LA and it's really busy down there and you just don't want to have to worry about getting permission to go places. If you're on a flight plan, they'll just tell you where to go and you just do exactly what they say. Or if there's a presidential TFR down there sometimes, it's sometimes easier just to go an instrument flight plan to get down there. And so whenever you get whenever we call up here, we ask the tower, we say, okay, we have information, Bravo, we're at the here, taxi, whatever. They will, before that, give you, hey Noel, okay, I'm going to send Sarah down to grab it. And when you're at the gate, right? Okay. Okay, great. Okay, sounds good. Let me grab you a umbrella. So you're good? Okay. Hey, ask her to tell you about the 99s when you come back. Okay. So what they'll do is they'll say your tail number, you're cleared to the Aspen Airport as filed, climb and maintain 8,000, expect 16,000 10 minutes after departure, and then they'll give you a departure frequency and a squawk code. And Benjamin, you remember the transponder? You type in those numbers into your transponder because then ATC knows who you are. Right? Otherwise, you fly with 1200 in your transponder. Okay, and then we got some miscellaneous definitions. Okay. Whenever we fly, we set our altimeter. Right? That's why we get the ATIS. And we set the altimeter to NSL. Because as we're flying mean sea level, because as we're flying over the hills and stuff, okay, if we had to go, okay, how high are we over the ground? If we had to do that every time we go up and down, that, it would be impossible to stay at the same place because you'd be going up and down if you tried to stay the same height above the ground. Plus, you wouldn't have any idea how to figure it out. So whenever we're flying, we always fly at 3,500 feet, say. and that's set by our altimeter, or 4,500 feet, or whatever. Okay. Once we get really high, though, the altimeter doesn't really work as well. Plus, when we're really high, there's nothing to hit. One of the reasons we want to have our altimeter set correctly is because if we have the altimeter set correctly and we're coming down through the clouds like today, we know that we can go down to 200 feet when we're coming in here and we won't hit anything. But if you're at 18,000 feet, there's no mountains up there. You're not going to hit anything. So everybody sets their altimeter to 29.92 when they're up high. And that way, you won't be hitting other airplanes. You're not going to hit any mountains, but no other airplanes. Okay, and then we already mentioned ADS-B out. That gives your location and altitude to ATC and other aircraft. ADS-B in is what lets you know where the other aircraft are on your iPad or on your panel. Okay, and your clearance. Howdy, come on over here and have a seat on this table here. You lost somebody.
Sarah's in the washer.
Okay. And then ATC, we already know about ATC, that's air traffic control, right? So the first airspace we're going to do is Class A. And that's at or above 18,000 feet and below 60,000 feet. Yes?
So I was wondering, if I'm, so say I'm at like, I don't know, 20,000, 30, 40,000 feet above sea level, and I'm flying from LAX and I'm flying over KSVG, do I still have to contact tower or no?
No. You are talking to,
So,
you're talking to LA Center, and then you're talking to Oakland Center, and then when you go down, you're talking to approach control. And then when you leave, you're talking to departure. So you don't, and in fact, that's one of the reasons why you set your altimeter to 29.92, because when you're normally flying, every 100 miles or so, they'll give you a new altimeter setting. But if you're up, if you're moving at 400 knots, you would have to change your altimeter like every 15 minutes, and that's kind of annoying to do. So they just say, okay, everybody sets it at 29.92, and you're on the ADS-B exchange a lot, right? Do you remember right offhand what altitude most of the planes fly at?
18?
Well, they usually fly, even if they're just going from LAX to San Francisco, it's usually around 35,000 feet or so, because that's where they're most efficient. And so and it doesn't take them very long to get up there. And so that everybody up there is, they're all talking to ATC because they're on instrument flight plans, because that's one of the requirements for being up there. You have to be an IFR pilot, and your plane has to be IFR. There's some other rules as well, but that's basically it. And we talk about that as the flight levels. So if you're at 35,000 feet, your altimeter is set to flight level 350. Okay. And then down near the ground, that's class Golf. Okay. And basically the definition of it is it's everything that isn't the rest of this stuff. Okay. Yeah. Actually, we have one of those, and it'll be in there in a minute. So yeah, that's in one of the books. And class Golf is like 700 and 1,200 feet usually around airports. Okay, and then sometimes, like, we're a class Delta airport, but when the tower's closed, we go to Golf. Okay, and then some are always class Golf. That would be like Oceano and Lompoc and San Ynez. And Nucleama, yes.
But not Paso, which is really
No, and Paso, in fact, we turn into Golf when the tower's closed, but Paso is always class Echo. And the reason for that is because they have ATC all the way to the ground, and their weather reporting is somewhat different from ours, and so they have reliable weather all all the time, all the way to the ground. And so that's, I don't know how they decided we don't have reliable weather, but that's how they did it. Okay. And then another weird thing for class golf, usually it's like class alpha never shows up on the map, right? Because it's everything above 18,000 feet.
Yeah.
And so if you put that on there, then you wouldn't be able to see anything else because it's everything.
Yeah.
Well, golf is basically the same way. It's like everything down below, and so you really don't see much of it where it's actually showing it to you, unless you're right off the coast. And that's not quite in focus, there is it. Let's see if we can get a little bit better focus. There, that's a little bit better. You see where it says 5,500 MSL? That means that class golf goes from the surface to 5,500 feet.
Okay.
And then see on the other side where it says 1,200 AGL?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
It only goes to, or class golf only goes to 1,200 above ground level.
Above ground level, right? And so if you're on the left-hand side, your altimeter will tell you where it is. But if you're on the right-hand side, your altimeter won't really tell you. But although in this case, because it's right over the ocean, you know that your altimeter and AGL happen to match for whatever reason. And that little jagged line is what shows what it is. Now it used to be that there was a lot of class golf space over like North Dakota, New Mexico, places like that. I can't find any class golf anymore except one little spot in New Mexico. And it goes up to 14,500 feet. Okay. Now, Echo is where we mostly fly. Okay. So we'll take off out of here. We're Delta. We take off and say we're going to Santa Maria. Well, it's Echo between here and there. And basically in class Echo, we don't have to have transponders. We don't have to have ADSB as long as we're below 10,000 feet. And like we were talking about, Paso is a class Echo airport. You don't have to talk to anybody when you take off out of there. I have taken off from Paso on the runway that goes south 19, and as I'm taking off, and it's kind of curved like this, and I look up and I go, hey, why is that airplane coming right at me? Because they didn't say they were taking off on 1, and they didn't really have to, and at the same time there are some other people using the other runway there, so it can be challenging if you don't talk to people. So most people, like, they have radios, unless you've got like an older airplane, like built in the 30s and 40s, and even then they usually have their handheld. But it's not required to be able to talk to anybody. So you can just fly it without talking with whoever, you don't talk at all. Okay. And then this is a chart with Paso. They have instrument approaches there. And remember we just talked about in golf, you can be flying along with 1 mile visibility and clear clouds. Well, if you're on an instrument flight plan and you're coming into Paso, you don't want to pop out of the clouds all of a sudden and there's a plane that's like inches in front of you, right? So they make it so that you have to have more visibility and you have to be further away from the clouds. And those little, they're magenta shaded areas, that means that down to 700 feet, you have to be in class Echo where you have better visibility. And you see the little dash lines that run around the airport there? The magenta dash lines?
Oh,
That
that's a mobile, right?
No, on the circle that goes around it.
Oh,
Yes,
the
you're
circle,
correct.
okay.
The hash lines, the circle there means that Echo goes all the way to the ground.
Okay.
Okay. And then San Luis has 2 Echo extensions. We have an ILS coming in from Los Osos there, and so they want to make sure that it's clear, and then you go down to almost 200 feet above the ground. So that's the little dash one there means that Echo goes all the way to the ground. But again, you don't want to be popping out and finding somebody is flying along in golf at 1 mile visibility and clear clouds. So they make those extensions for that. Okay. And again, this is another example. The Golf and Echo are both shown here on this chart. Right? Because the space above 5,500 is Echo, below is Golf. Okay. And again, majority of airports in the US are Delta. And they can be really, really busy, like Van Nuys or Long Beach, or you guys have heard of Peterborough Airport?
Oh, yeah.
Very, very busy airport in New York. And it's like, it's a class Delta though. And then Santa Maria is also a class Delta. And so that you never know just by the classification how busy it's going to be.
It's not wrong.
Yeah. And it's under the Bravo shelf there for LaGuardia and Kennedy and Newark. And then again, here's some examples. Vandenberg turns out to be a class Delta. And San Luis, Santa Maria. Okay. Yes, it is. In fact, Vandenberg was originally one of the alternates for the space shuttle in case it couldn't land in.
So
it had a really long runway. I don't think it ever landed there though.
And it has
Did the shuttle ever land in Vandenberg?
No, the only shuttle that went there was the Enterprise, the test article, and it arrived on 727. I don't see it.
Oh, that's cool.
I'm old.
And Class Charlie is the same deal. Some of them, it's really easy to get in and out of. Like Santa Barbara, I don't have any problem flying down to Santa Barbara, even though it's Class Charlie. Monterey, easy. I've flown into San Jose, and it's just flying by San Jose is nerve-wracking. But you can fly into San Jose. Yeah.
So, when we were flying to Santa Maria, I heard the controller tell the plane to contact Santa Barbara 121 something.
Yes.
Why are they not contacting SoCal or LA Central or
Oh,
something?
because below a certain level, you have approach and departure control.
Mhm.
And then once you get above that level, you go over to center.
Oh.
Like for example, if you're flying north, you'll contact Oakland Center. And then some places where there's no airports, you'll contact like Oakland Center up that way.
Oh.
But like when we take off out of here, we contact Santa Barbara departure. We just call them departure, even though it's the same person. And so if you're coming in, like on an instrument flight plan, they'd be talking to Santa Barbara approach, and they would tell them, okay, this is what, which instrument approach procedure to use, and they would vector them around to wherever they wanted to go. And basically, it's the same person, and sometimes it's the same person, like multiple hops, because like their radio, like we start off at 12772, and then when you get down to Santa Maria, it's 12415, and then when you get further down to Santa Barbara, it's 124. But it might be the same person every time. They just switch to different radios because the coverage of the radio is a little different. Yeah. And you can actually go onto Live ATC and listen to approach.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, sometimes most Class Charlie airports close at night because they don't get enough traffic. And sometimes they become Echoes, sometimes they become Golfs. It just sort of depends on, who knows. It's one of those, I don't know. They have rules, I'm not sure what they are. Okay. And then that picture you were looking at there, it has these nice, perfect little circles for the different stuff. You don't really usually find nice little perfect circles with the two rings unless you're out like in the middle of nowhere kind of places like Indianapolis. There's nothing else around, but like if you got mountains or other airspace, then they're always like really convoluted. Like Santa Barbara has got mountains right beside it there, and so theirs is kind of chopped off. And you can see that around Santa Barbara, see those little shaded areas there?
Oh yeah.
The airspace, if you look, can you see that it says right here, it says 40 and 15. The top of the airspace is 4,000 feet MSL. So we can fly over top of Santa Barbara if we want. And the bottom is 1,500 feet. But then they want to make it so that all the way down to 700 feet is protected for the instrument approaches. And then the big busy airspace is Bravo. And you actually need to say, you actually need to get a clearance to get into that airspace. On the other two, you just need to be talking to them, and they'll, you know, as long as you say your tail number, and if they say, I'm busy right now, stand by, and they give you your tail number, then you can just keep going in, and they'll get back to you eventually. If they say, airplane calling San Luis, stand by, that means you have not established any communication with them, so you can't go into the airspace. You have to stay out of it. That's one of the differences between the different airspaces. But Class Bravo, you actually have to have, they actually have to say you are cleared into the Class Bravo. And then you have to repeat back to them, I'm cleared into the Class Bravo. Because otherwise, and then they're going to make sure you do exactly what they want you to do all the time in there. So they're watching you all the time. And then there's, any of you guys ever heard of the Mode C veil? Yeah, there's a 30-mile circle around all the Class Bravos. And you have to have a transponder, and nowadays you have to have ADS-B to go in there. Because they want to know exactly where all the airplanes are. And the reason they did that was back in the 70s, a little Piper was flying around and crashed into an airliner. And so they decided that, you know, the airspace is getting too busy. We need to make sure that that doesn't ever happen again. Okay. So sometimes they do this like wedding cake kind of thing where each of the rings is a different altitude. And then sometimes, like Atlanta, they have the ring around it. But notice there's like all those little squares there for the different altitudes. And that's because the runways go east to west. And so they want to protect the areas. They don't need a circle. They just need to protect the areas around the runways. And then this is the one that she was passing around. And this is like really very simplified because you don't usually find them looking exactly like this. They look slightly different. But the wedding cake, upside down wedding cake is the Class Bravos. Class Charlie usually just has one upside down wedding cake thing. And Class Deltas are usually a circle. And then Class A is above 18,000 feet. That's where the big jets and the turboprops fly.
It's dashed, though. It's dashed. It's like.
Oh, no, Class A doesn't show up on the charts because it's everywhere. It's like, as soon as you go up to 18,000 feet, you're an A. And so if you put it on the map, there would be nothing else on the map. Same thing with Class Golf. It's everywhere, and if you put it on the map, you know, you wouldn't see it. And the same thing with Echo. Usually, Echo, it's everywhere, and so unless they're making something different, like around the airports, they don't put it on the map. Okay. So why don't you guys open your charts up here? And you know, in the old days, they had videotapes where you would like watch Sporty's videotapes, and they would actually show you how do you open and fold a map. Can you imagine you're flying along in your airplane and you've got your map like this, and you go, okay. Okay. So, see if you can find, what am I doing here? This is Chino, and it's down by LA. So, here's a hint. LA is near the ocean, so we need to find some blue. And if we find some blue and go in, we can find it. So, do you see? Maybe it's on the other side of yours, Daisy. By the way, if you guys want to eat your little cookies that you can go ahead and do that.
There's cookies.
Only 4 because I eat the rest.
Oh, okay.
Casey, have you found LA?
Not yet. Oh, I found
Oh, this is
I was
the
gonna say,
stadium. There's a lot of
Well, let's
stadiums.
look and see if there's any hints around Chino. If you look up at the screen real quick.
The blue stuff.
So what is it, what's the VOR there? Have you learned about VOR?
no, we haven't done that yet.
What are
But- But what we can do is, the class Bravo has these blue lines marking the end, marking where it is. So did you find LAX?
Oh, I think I got an area wrong. Oh, that's an area wrong. Shoot.
Well, this is San Diego. This is LA. If we go over this way, we get the edges of class Bravo. And so Chino is around here somewhere.
Yeah, I was looking at Paradise and the flight service is Riverside. So I was like, oh, there's another hint.
Los Angeles, there's class B for Los Angeles. Oh, found it.
Okay, you found it. You see where he's got his finger? And that means Daisy, you have your finger? Okay. So, you're kind of a airspace nerd. What do you think the airspace is right underneath that 27? I can't hear you. Yeah, what? Yeah. No, the 27 is the top of the airspace for Chino. That means the Chino goes up,
Top left.
this 27 right
There's
there.
several 27s
Oh,
up
that's-
Oh,
there.
I'm sorry, yes, that 27 right there.
Okay, like which one it's
Yeah, so right below 27, what do you think the, well, would it actually, it's actually that's the top of the delta, right? So do you see that circle all around there?
Yeah,
The little dashed blue circle,
yeah,
that's class delta.
okay. Now
Okay.
I get it.
Now, if you go up, if we go just to the left of that 27, okay, and we start going up, and we're above 2,700 feet, then we get into this area here, right? And this says that the Bravo starts at 9,000 feet and goes to 10,000, but there's nothing between the 2,700 and the 9,000 there, except now we've got, notice this other circle that goes around here that's kind of magenta.
Oh, this one, right there.
Where's Chino again? Yes.
So
Notice that right there?
the-
That's for the class Charlie airspace.
Okay. Oh, okay.
And so it's like, oh, wait a minute. The Bravo starts at 9,000, but right above Chino is, and what's that airport right there? I can't remember it offhand.
That's Riverside.
Cool. Ontario.
Ontario.
Oh, Ontario.
Yeah. So we have class Charlie because that's the magenta there, and the class Charlie goes. Can anybody see where it goes to? We kind of have to look inside there to see where it goes, and it goes to 2,700 to 5,000 feet. And then we get the class Echo that goes to 9,000 feet, we've got Bravo to 10,000 feet, and then after that is Echo, which goes to 18,000 feet, and then we've got Alpha, which goes the rest. So, it can get really, really complicated what airspace you're in. So, what do you think I do when I fly down to LA? I say, can I get flight following, please? Because then they will tell me, okay, you are now flying through this airspace right here for Ontario. Go talk to them. And then they'll go, okay, you want to land in Chino? Okay, I'm going to hand you off to Chino, and I want you to go down to pattern altitude in Chino, right? And if I'm taking off out of here, Chino will tell me, hey, I don't want you going in his airspace because he's busy. So you need to stay down below a certain amount. And so when I take off, they'll hand me off to, it probably, I don't know what the name of the approach would be down there. It's whatever, there's dozens of different approaches. So it's whatever the approaches and departures are, they'll hand me off to them, and then they'll go, okay. November 1997 Hotel, or below 3,000 feet. And I'll stay out or below 3,000 feet, and that'll keep me out of their airspace, and then later on they may say something else. And when by the way, whenever they say at or below 3,000 feet, they don't mean that. What they mean is, I want you to be at 3,000 feet. I don't want you to be at 3,001 feet. I don't want you to be at 2,800 feet. I want you to be at 3,000 feet.
Okay.
Because that way, I know what you're doing. And I don't want you doing any weird stuff. Like, you know, you're flying a straight line. Don't go, oh, let's go look at those golfers over there. And you go, they want to know what you're doing because it's really, really busy down there.
Okay.
Right? Now, if you're flying around here, and I'm talking to ATC, I sometimes just say, hey, you know, I want to go see if there's any seals or whales. So I'm talking to them, and I'll just go this way, and I'll go that way, and occasionally they'll go, what are you doing? Because they get a little confused, because it's like, I thought you were going to go like fly this way, and I go, no, I'm just looking at the whales. Or if I'm going to go out of their airspace, they might say, hey, you know, if I'm flying up by Cayucas, and the Santa Barbara airspace ends, they may go, hey, you're going to be flying out on airspace soon. What are your intentions? And I go, oh, I'm just going to go up to see if Whale Rock Reservoir is full or not. And I'll turn around and come back in. So you can talk to them. And here, you know, you can basically do whatever you want because you're in Class Echo. Down there, it's kind of hard to tell what airspace you're in and whose you're in, so you have to be really, really careful. So, more nerding out, we can skip this one here, but it's the same deal. You know, you can find lots of places and go, okay, what are the different airspaces? Just bring like, what are all the airspaces right there? You know, or what are all the different airspaces right there?
Fun one is San Martin, which is just south of San Jose. That's where I did my law cross country too.
Okay. So now let's see if we can, I think it's on the other side. Why don't you flip them over and look for San Luis Obispo.
Oh, okay.
And, you know, we might want to hold them a little bit so that you don't have them all over the place.
Try to keep it in like a small way.
Yeah. And like I said, there were tricks that they would teach you whenever you were flying like that.
My uncle
Yeah.
taught me so
Yeah.
many about 40 maps.
Yeah.
He gave me like a bucket load of them, and he was like, okay, so you have to learn how to do that.
Yes.
Cool. So you can fit it onto your knee. There's
Okay.
KP.
Now again, we used to have these books here, which would give us all kinds of information about, like, you know, what the ATIS was, what the ground control and all that kind of stuff. But if you're just flying around and using, again, we used to use maps and we couldn't just tap on ForeFlight to find out everything about the airport and the weather and everything. And so, sort of like I'm teaching you guys how to use the VCR. But It's, you know, I mean, it kind of translates over to, you know, actual flying.
So when, because I got my license almost 20 years ago, so when people learn to fly now, they don't even do this?
You need to know how to do this for the test.
You do.
Other than that, no, I just use ForeFlight.
So, but to pass the actual test.
To pass the actual test, and again, by the time these guys are old enough to do that, they may not have to know that.
Is this like how we
Yes.
Maybe like the heads up display.
Yes.
Has
And
it.
in fact, I was just flying with a guy, his plane was in the shop, so I flew him around a bunch. And he doesn't like to use the charts like this, because there's a lot of stuff in here like, I don't care, you know, and ForeFlight has a simplified version that, you know, like, this is kind of like, there's a whole bunch of stuff in here, and there's my flight plan. But if you go to this version, this is one that ForeFlight created, and it only has the stuff you need, right? There's a mountain there, don't hit it. You know? There's my path, and it shows like this right here. You talked about MOAs. There's another thing called restricted areas. Yeah. And again, if you get too low, it will turn things red on you. So, but a lot of people fly like this because, okay, it does show you that there's an airport there, and it doesn't tell you what the altitude is because presumably you're flying with ATC and you're high enough that you don't care. You know? And then it does tell you how, you know, like, there's rings around like wherever you are.
Weather's next week, right?
We did ATIS last week. Oh,
But
yeah.
This is with all
Yeah,
the,
I don't have, but yeah, you can turn weather on here.
this is all the TFRs. Do you have the TFRs?
We are going to get the TFRs in a minute, yes.
Okay.
And TFRs won't show up on your map because they're set for Disneyland, they're temporary flight restrictions. And so since they're temporary and the maps, you know, are issued every 56 days, they don't show up on them. So let me switch back to. Okay. So we can find some interesting stuff though, even if we don't have ForeFlight. So, for example, San Luis Obispo, we get blue. Okay, so we know that since it's blue, it's a towered airport. Okay. And then next to the airport, and here it's fairly easy to find, but remember we were just looking in LA, and there's just everything everywhere, so it's hard to find this information. But we can see it's called San Luis Obispo County Regional Airport.
San Luis Obispo County Regional Airport.
Yes.
Automated weather observational system.
Yes.
You write that down.
And then it tells you what the identifier is for it, right? SPP, or Sierra Bravo Papa. So if you're talking to the controllers, you can say, you know, can I get flight following to Santa Barbara, and they know where it is. But if you say, you know, I want to get flight following to King City, they may or may not know what the code for that is. So it would be Kilo India Charlie. So you can just tell them what it is, and it's on the map, so you can, you know, if you've forgotten, you can look it up very easily. And then the CT means there's a control tower, and the frequency is 124.0. The star means it's only part-time, so yeah, we close at 8 o'clock at night and open at 6 in the morning. And then the C there means that there's a CTAF. You know what that means?
Common traffic advisory.
And what does that mean?
It's like what almost all airports have.
Well, sort of. Airports like Paso and New Koyama have the CTAF only because there's no tower there. But what this says is that when the tower is closed, we use 124.0.
Yeah.
Okay, and then it says the ATIS, which is 120.6. What do you think the 212 stands for?
Two what? Huh?
There's-
212.
I don't know.
That's the height above sea level.
Okay, so 200.
We're 212 feet at the, and it's actually measured at the takeoff for 29.
Okay.
And then the star L means there's pilot controlled lighting. So if we're coming in here at night and the tower's closed and we want the lights on, we just tap our push to talk 5 times and the lights go as bright as they go. And
Okay.
then 3 times they go down lower. And actually it was kind of interesting, you might find this interesting in Paso. I flew into 3-1 because the winds were bizarre and flew in, saw the lights on the side there, and said, okay, I'm perfect on the glide slope, fly right in. Then I dropped somebody off, came back, picked somebody else up, flew in, and it's like, how did the lights go off in like an hour or 2 hours? But there's pilot controlled VASI in Paso. So even though the lights on the side of it to tell you what your altitude is, so that's one of the things in this little blue book or green book. But it's in the what they now call the chart supplement that you can get on ForeFlight, and it's a good idea to read that before you go someplace because then you know stuff like that. And if you don't, then you don't know that kind of stuff. Okay, and then what do you think the 61 is on there? A hint, I mentioned that earlier about how long the runway is.
Oh, so it's 6,100.
6,100 feet long.
Okay.
And that's the length of the longest runway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the longest runway.
Not all of them.
It's gonna be the longest.
Yeah, and then 12295 is, it's like you can talk to the fuelers or the FBO on that frequency. Although oftentimes they have their own frequency that they use as well.
Yeah.
Okay. And then if you, I won't make you guys open your charts anymore. On the back of the charts,
Oh, the legend.
the legend is on there. Oh, you can see it there. And again, there's a bunch of stuff on here you don't care about, but if you do want to find out what's actually on the charts,
It's like a
there's a lot of it here. And then I sent your parents a whole list of things that they can download for you, and one of them is a book that the FAA puts out, which has all the different symbols that are on there, most of which you don't really care about that much. Occasionally there are some that you do care about. Okay, and let's go back to Paso here.
Wait, so we open it up again? So we open it up.
Oh, we can just look on here.
Okay.
Okay, or if you want to go on your chart, you can do that. Okay, now do you see the yellow down there?
Oh yeah, the city?
Yeah, and that basically indicates at night, that would be the part that's lit up. So that it gives you also an idea as to like, okay, I'm flying in, Paso is flat and dry and brown out there, and it's like, okay, where is the airport? And so one way to find it is go, okay, I know where the city is, and then there's a road that goes that way next to it, and there's a road that goes up and down there, so it just makes it a little bit easier. Again, before GPS, people, what they called, their IFR was I fly roadways. Because if you fly along a road, you know where you are.
Yeah.
Okay. So what do you think the longest length, the longest runway, what's the longest runway length at Paso?
800, 600, 6,000?
6,000 feet. And what's the altitude there? Yeah.
839 feet above sea level.
Yeah. Right. And again, if you don't know anything else about this airport, when you came in to fly in a pattern, you would fly at about 1,000 feet above the airport because that's a normal traffic pattern. So you'd fly at 1,839 feet. Although I think theirs might only be 800 feet. Does that sound right? The traffic pattern up in 1,600 there?
No.
It's 1,800. Okay, so it is 1,000 feet above. Okay, and then Nigel, you were talking to me about MOAs.
Yep.
You see MOAs on there, right? Yeah. And there's actually Hunter Liggett, Fort Hunter Liggett is over towards the ocean there. That's why that's MOA.
No, so
And then what about, you see up there, sort of to the northwest of Paso, there's an airport called McMillan.
Oh, yeah. CA 62.
Yeah, and that's actually in the restricted area there. And that actually turns out that that's part of the Camp Roberts. And what's the length of that airport? I'm sorry, that runway.
900,000 foot.
No, that's the elevation is 923,
Yes.
and it's 3,400 feet long. And I don't know what, I looked on Google Earth and it's really bad shape. I don't know if they use it for anything, but I do know that up there that they do have a lot of drone exercises. And you see that little like airplane-y thing right there?
Oh, the glider thing?
Yeah, that means that there's,
With the UA between
Yeah.
it and the H.
it's kind of really hard to see, but see it says UA there? Unmanned aerial vehicles. I think they usually it's UAV. Apparently,
yeah.
they abbreviate it here. They don't like it when you call them drones. They like it when you call them unmanned aerial vehicles. So that means that if you're flying up there, be careful because they're being taken off the land. And I don't think they use the runway for that. I think they just do it off the dirt up there somewhere. And then what do you think the H stands for?
Helicopter.
Yep. And how high is the helicopter?
630 feet above sea level.
And what is the length of the helicopter runway?
0.
Exactly. Trick question. Yeah. And then and what's the 126.2 is what? CTAF. They don't have a tower, it's a CTAF. And the name of it is right above it there, Roberts AHP. Okay? And then they call those hashes with the little things on there. But notice there's some blue ones there. What do you think the blue ones are, Daisy? Well, if you do you see any blue text? And there's an R next to it. That's a restricted area. Yeah. And the difference between a MOA and a restricted area is that you can fly through a MOA without talking to them. It's not a good idea sometimes.
Yeah, F-16.
Yeah. And in fact, it's kind of fun to fly it. If you go from here to like Fresno, the Lemoore Air Force Base is right there, and there's a huge MOA there. And I fly through there all the time, going over to Fresno or Visalia, and I just talk to them, and I talk to them a little more approach, and they say, okay, maybe, go a little south, or maybe they say, just keep going through. And one time I was over there, and it's like, you know how ATC will call out traffic for you, right? And they'll say, there's a flight of 2 at 12 o'clock, 16,000 feet. And I'm like at 5,000 feet, and I'm like, why are they telling me this? And then I'm flying along, there's a flight of 2 at 12 o'clock at 12,000 feet. And I'm like, that's pretty quick. And then there's a flight of 2 at 12,000 feet at 10,000 feet, rather. And then all of a sudden I see these 2 jets just kind of like falling out of the sky.
Oh my
And they were just doing some kind of like exercises that jet pilots do. And it was kind of fun to see them. And ATC was like, okay, you're cool because I'm talking to them. And they're over there. And as long as you aren't flying as fast as they are, I'm going to keep you away from them. So if you're flying in a MOA, you can do it without any problem. Restricted areas, on the other hand, like Roberts there, maybe that's because they're doing some UAV stuff. They will tell you, I don't want you anywhere near here. Don't go through here. And in fact, you can tell that they're going to ask you about that because if you're flying straight back from like Salinas or San Jose, you might go right across that MOA, that restricted area there. And if it's hot, what they'll do is they'll say, restricted area 2504 is hot. Say intentions. And anytime ATC tells you say intentions, that means you're doing something that is going to be wrong in a while unless we do something different. So don't do that. And in fact, they've done that to me too. But I'm going, there's a mountain like right in front of you. Say intentions. You go, well, Since it's not gonna move, I think I'll intend to go around it.
Yeah.
But it's always a clue if APC says say intentions, that means, hey, perk up your ears, something is gonna happen that you're not gonna like unless you do something different. Yes, it can get very noisy for a very short time. Okay, so these are the special use airspace we were just talking about, okay? There is some airspace where they only let the military in, and that's prohibited areas. There's a couple of them around that I've seen, but most of them are like the White House, the Capitol building, and then Camp David if the president is there. And so that you can't go in there at all no matter what. But restricted areas, if they're hot, you can go in. If they're not hot, if they're hot, you can't go in. If they're not hot, you can go in. Now, what do you think the restricted area around Area 51? Do you think they're ever allowed to go in there?
Oh no.
No.
way.
Even though a lot of them you go in, you can't go in that one. And then like, there's some in near Vandenberg. We can actually fly right across Vandenberg Airport if they're not hot.
But you can't fly over there with a rocket launcher.
But not over the rocket launch pad. That one is always hot,
It
no
says
matter
that
what. They'll
the
never let
airspace-
you fly over top of it.
On the airspace, it says like that it's from ground level to infinity.
That's whenever there's a TFR for it, yes.
So
Yes. They won't let you do that.
When you said Area 51, I know you probably might not know the answer to this, but if you ran out of gas over Area 51, would they let you land in Area 51? And they said,
I can actually answer that question because when I first went into the Air Force, I was a radar controller at Nellis Air Force Base. So first off, you will not be flying over Area 51, R486A. The reason is it's surrounded by a MOA where they do the Air Force's version of Top Gun. So it has about a 50-mile barrier on all sides, which is by design. So the closest you would be doing is going down the airway that's pretty much going from Reno to Vegas, and it's 10 miles wide. So there are airports there that you could lose an engine in. We did have Emory Riddle student. He graduated from Prescott, and his family was in Reno, and he decided to fly direct, and he went right through 4806, and he got a fighter escort, was forced to land at Mercury Airport, and he spent 72 hours with some people in a dark room. And they said, we'll let you know when your aircraft is available. They disassembled it completely, packed all the pieces onto a flatbed, and gave him a number where to go pick it up. So, does that answer your question?
yeah. Just don't go
Okay.
anywhere, buddy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, if you're flying with ForeFlight and maybe even the flight plan go, whenever there's going to be an active MOA, they turn it red. So you can see, okay, it's active. They never do that for restricted areas. I'm not sure why ForeFlight, maybe they just don't get the information from them. Yeah.
What is the highlighted area or on the previous map? You see how that's kind of like
Where it's all red.
neon? It's like neon, you know?
Oh, that's where I put my finger.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
I
the
put my
green?
finger there because if you put your finger on the map, then this stuff on the side pops up and it tells you that from 200 feet to 11,000 feet, the Hunter Low MOA is active, and then from 11,000 feet to flight level 180, the Hunter High MOA is active.
Okay, I was like, I've never seen that on the map before.
Yeah, it's not on the map. In fact, you never see these red areas on the map either because they go on and off. And then temporary flight restrictions, because the temporary, except for Disneyland, they don't show up on the map. And they do show up like open air events, like stadiums. There'll be a TFR around them, and then like if you that one there, I think it's right around the raceway, so maybe there's some kind of automotive race or something like that. Presidential TFRs, when they're here, so you can fly into the outer part there as long as you're on a flight plan and you're squawking and talking to ATC, but you can't fly in the middle part there unless you're an airliner.
Okay. So they won't let you fly like where the president is.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense.
There's like a 10-mile circle around him
Yeah.
Yeah.
where it's
He's very
only
secure.
fighter
Yeah.
escorts.
And if you look there, you can see there's actually 2 of those. So one of them would be like he's landing at this place here, and then he's going to an event there, and so that they have different times for when you can go in and out of them. And even the airliners aren't allowed to take off and land when the president's jet's landing.
Dang.
And then even if you don't have a EFB, you can find them on their website. I think this doesn't show up on the maps, but I think this is fun. These are pyros. Whenever you're flying, they might ask you when you come in, hey, what were the tops? Or what's the ceiling? Because if you know, they might say, okay, I want to know what the highest clouds are coming in and out of here. But those right there are for icing and for turbulence. And you see the little eyeballs with the exclamation things right there?
Yeah.
That means, oh man, that was really bad. You should really look at this, because on my descent, I encountered wind shear, or I encountered extreme turbulence, or whatever.
Okay, so that's like letting other pilots know that they shouldn't kill their.
Well, you just have to be careful, right? And that we have procedures, like if there's wind shear, we know that we need to keep our airspeed up, and that, you know, be prepared for it, because all of a sudden, if there's wind shear, you might be going really down real fast, and so you don't want to say, okay, I'm going down, you know, maybe give it more power, but then you go up, and then so you just have to be aware that it's happening. And we ran out of time, but this might be something fun, is to take the chart and just find the different stuff on there that's on there. So like, remember the 121 on the corner there in the 35, those are our latitude and longitude. And you see the little dash line there? Remember we did the isogonic lines, right? And then there's all the different features. So just it's just fun to go through the map and just
Yeah, it's true.
find stuff that's on there.
That's what I do before bed. I start like an I Spy game, and I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
I gotta find one mall, one whatever.
Yeah. Or do something like just take and go, okay, I want to fly from Santa Maria to Lompoc to Santa Ynez. What airspace am I going to go through? Who do I need to talk to? When do I need to talk to people? What frequency do I talk to people on?
Yeah. What should I avoid?
Okay, so that's your homework.
Okay.
Okay, and I think that obviously you're not out there in the parking lot waiting for your kid, but other people are out there waiting for their kids. So let's hop in the cars and zoom out of here.